The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
You're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am, of course, your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Wednesday, June 14th, 2017. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, we'd like to thank our supporters, those of you who make the show possible, our patrons. Without you, we cannot do this. If you would like to support the Benjamin Dixon Show and everything that we're doing here, go to patreon.com/the BPD Show. We have news. It's been someone tweeted this to me. It's been a peak America day. And they tweeted that to me just before the show when we were discussing 4 shooting incidents that happened today. 3 of which appear to be active shooters, scenarios with multiple injuries. One had multiple fatalities. We'll get to all 4 of them today. And the first one, obviously, that we want to discuss is the shooting that occurred this morning, early morning baseball practice for GOP congresspeople, senators, and congressmen. They were preparing for a charity bipartisan baseball game that's scheduled to take place on tomorrow. And at that incident, at that event, several people were shot. 6 people were sent to the hospital, shot, including House Republican leadership, Steve Scalise. He was shot in the hip, and he was taken into surgery, and he is reported to being in critical condition after surgery. There was an additional a congressional staffer who was shot, Zach Barth. He was shot in the leg, but he has since been released from the hospital. There was a lobbyist there, a lobbyist for Tyson Foods, Matt Mika. He was shot and released. Actually, he has not been released. He's in critical condition out of surgery, however. There are 2 Capitol Police officers who were shot, Crystal Griner and David Bailey. Both of them were shot. And then there was an additional representative, Roger Williams, a Texas Republican, who was injured, but he was released from the hospital today. So this happened early in the morning, and it was committed by someone who identified themselves as a fervent Bernie Sanders supporter. There were some reports, I have not seen this confirmed, but there were some reports that the shooter asked if these men out here playing baseball, or these representatives out here playing baseball, whether or not they were Republican or Democrat. And after asking that, this is when the shooter began to shoot. That's an unconfirmed report, but I have seen it from 2 different places. So again, we'll take that piece with a grain of salt. But it has spun a whirlwind of political commentary on political violence, hate speech, and trying to tie hate speech to this individual, to Bernie Sanders, to the progressive movement in general. There was one representative, Chris Collins of New York. He said on WBEN radio station, he said, I can only hope that the Democrats would tone down their rhetoric. The rhetoric has been outrageous. The finger pointing, just the tone and the angst and the anger directed towards Donald Trump, his supporters. Really, then, some people react to things like that. They get angry as well, and you fuel the fires. The same representative said that from now on, he will be carrying a weapon in his pocket going forward. Before we get to all of the political connotations, there are several statements that were sent out today. The first video that we have is of President Trump speaking about the incident, and this is what he had to say.
As you all know, shortly after 7 a.m. this morning, a gunman opened fire on members of Congress and their staffs as they were practicing for tomorrow's annual charity baseball game. Authorities are continuing to investigate the crime, and the assailant has now died from his injuries. The FBI is leading the investigation and will continue to provide, as you all know, as new information shortly becomes available.
Okay, so that was a brief statement from President Trump. He went on to describe the condition of Representative Steve Scalise and obviously to wish well wishes towards everyone that was involved in the shooting. There was also a statement, because it came out that this individual was a supporter of Bernie Sanders and that he was a part of the Bernie Sanders campaign. He volunteered for the Bernie Sanders campaign. Bernie Sanders went to the Senate floor today and made a speech not only denouncing violence, but denouncing the individual and any type of political violence for the purposes of for any reason. This is the video of Bernie Sanders. This is what he had to say. Take a listen in.
Madam President, I have just been informed that the alleged shooter at the Republican baseball practice this morning is someone who apparently volunteered on my presidential campaign. I am sickened by this despicable act, and let me be as clear as I can be. Violence of any kind is unacceptable in our society, and I condemn this action in the strongest possible terms. Real change can only come about through nonviolent action, and anything else runs counter to our most deeply held American values. I know I speak for the entire country in saying that my hopes and prayers are that Representative Scalise, congressional staff, and the Capitol police officers who were wounded make a quick and full recovery.
So that was Senator Bernie Sanders denouncing the shooter, who is 66 years old, James Hodgkinson of Belleville, Illinois. He was a volunteer for Bernie Sanders' campaign. He was vehemently opposed to Donald Trump. Clearly, he took his political ideology and his desires to express it. He took it to the point of attacking congressmen and senators as they practice. And if you saw the video of this man, of the shooting, you could hear almost 2 full minutes of rounds going off. I mean, anywhere between 50 and 75 shots that this man got off firing towards these representatives. And as Senator Rand Paul said this morning, if it was not for Steve Scalise being there, it's very likely that he would have killed many people, because the only security that was there, the 2 officers who were there, Capitol Police, Crystal Griner and David Bailey, they were only there because Steve Scalise is a part of the leadership of the House of Representatives. Other House members do not get a security detail. So had not those 2 officers been there, it's very likely that with all of those rounds, he would have killed probably everyone there. So clearly, it's needless to say that this type of activity, this type of violence is not productive. It should be condemned in the strongest, in every sense of the word. It is definitely something that is not, that should not be a part of the progressive movement, any movement. Now, we'll talk about the political components of this, the political aspects, rather, of this in about 5 seconds. We're going to get to it because there's quite a bit of hypocrisy and virtue signaling that's taking place. But one last statement that I want to share is from Congressman, House Speaker Paul Ryan, and this is what he had to say.
My colleagues, there are very strong emotions throughout this House today. We are all horrified by this dreadful attack on our friends and on our colleagues and those who serve and protect this Capitol. We are all praying for those who are attacked and for their families. Steve Scalise, Zachary Barth, Matt Micah, Special Agent David Bailey, Special Agent Crystal Griner, We are all giving our thoughts to those currently being treated for their injuries at this moment. And we are united. We are united in our shock. We are united in our anguish. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us.
So that was House Speaker Paul Ryan speaking before the House of Representatives today. He received a standing ovation, a bipartisan standing ovation from nearly every member of the House. It was a full House listening to him speak. So the political components, the political aspects of this, there are plenty of people. Anytime something like this happens, and it's at this point that you've got the news. Anytime something like this happens, it's always a jockeying of outrage. And in the first few moments after something like this occurs, there's quite a few people who are waiting to find out, first of all, the race of the shooter, the ethnicity, the religion of the shooter. Because in those first few moments, we want to know, was it a black person? Was it a Muslim? How? Because that defines how we can spin it. This happens on both sides. And let's be clear. This happens on both sides, right? And so after we find out who they were, we find out who they were politically affiliated with, who they were aligned with. And in most cases, you could find some type of political alignment. Some type of political affiliation with which now we can use it as a political tool in and of itself to forward our agenda or their agenda, depending on who the culprit actually is. Now, anybody watching this is saying, oh, no, we don't do that. I don't care if you're progressive and you roll with me every single day and we're friends on Twitter. Stop lying. We do it. They do it. Everybody does it. And that is the climate across the country, politically speaking. And we want to see who the shooter was. We want to know what their religion was. And we want to know what their political affiliation was so that we can properly position ourselves for the ensuing arguments that are going to come. Here's what's never going to come. What's never going to come of any of these conversations are conversations about gun control, gun safety, reducing these types of incidents from happening in the first place. And the way we prevent that from happening is by figuring out how we can spin this politically. And we've seen in past incidents, we've seen in so many past incidents, it doesn't matter how grim of an incident it is, Republicans, and here, I'm getting ready to do exactly what I'm talking about, right? I'll keep it 100 with you. We have seen in so many incidents that no matter how grim it is, Republicans refuse to have a conversation on gun violence. And before I go any further, this has been a day of gun violence, politically motivated, domestic violence oriented. It doesn't matter. It's still gun violence. Earlier today, there was a shooting, a UPS shooting, where a UPS driver armed with a handgun opened fire at the UPS packaging center in San Francisco on today. He killed 3 people and then he killed himself. The victim, the gunmen, they were all company drivers. They were there at work, and this man opened fire and eventually killed himself. A day of gun violence. In Brooklyn, New York today, a man opened fire, just started shooting near Barclays. A day of gun violence. And right now, we're getting reports of an incident at Travis Air Force Base that's taking place as we speak. We have a couple of tweets or messages from the Travis Air Force Base saying that this is a real life situation. This is a real world active shooter incident. And this is what happens every single day in the United States of America. I don't have all the details for the Travis Air Force Base shooting because it's ongoing right now. These are the images on your screen. You see people being evacuated from the Air Force Base, and it was a part of the shopping center component of the Air Force Base. So this has been a day of active shooting. And this is really just another day in America. The only difference is that we have a heightened sense of awareness and outrage because of a particular group of people who rarely see political violence or this type of violence. We had elected officials attacked, and we had elected officials attacked for political reasons. There's no reason or possible way to get around that. But the reality of it is that this type of violence happens every single day in America. And we are so desensitized to it, and we're so used to jockeying positions, political positions, and drawing lines in the sand. We're so used to it that nothing ever gets done about it, particularly in the realm of God. I'm at the point where I think most of us are, where it's hard to be compassionate and empathetic about these types of incidents because we've seen the height of the barbarity that we are willing to embrace in the United States. When the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary School, we thought for sure that an incident like that would cause us to pause in America and reconsider what we are doing to ourselves by allowing anyone and everyone to get access to guns that would allow this type of tragedy to happen. It happened so quickly. We were wrong. We were so wrong that not only did we not have a conversation about it, but key political figures, not elected officials, but celebrities, political celebrities at the time. Joe the plumber said that your dead children doesn't trump my Second Amendment rights. This is how desensitized to gun violence in America we are. And now that this happens to be committed by today, the GOP baseball shooting incident has been committed by a left-leaning liberal, whatever you want to properly identify him as. Now that it's been committed by a person like this, oh, well, now the conversations have totally changed in right-wing circles. Now we want to talk about political speech that's violent. Now Chris Collins wants to say that the Democrats need to tone down their rhetoric. Now we want to talk about unity and why we need it. Paul Ryan, we're unified and we're all together. Together around what, Paul Ryan? Together, what are we unifying around? And what rhetoric needs to change? What rhetoric needs to change? Should we no longer identify the fact that the president of the United States is a liar? Is that something that we should not say for fear of someone hearing the truth? Are we unifying around the fact that we're getting ready to rob 24 million Americans of health care? Or should we not discuss that for fear of someone realizing that's happening and acting out violently? If we're concerned about political rhetoric and speech that leads to violence, what are we going to say? What did the Republicans say about the president of the United States fueling, not very directly fueling political violence himself? One thing I was proud of today was the fact that Bernie Sanders came out and in no uncertain terms condemned this violence. And I am still waiting on the president of the United States to condemn the killings that took place by his supporters. And it's not a matter of trying to find an equivalence or trying to find a way to be outraged. It is a reality. It is a reality. So drenched. America is so drenched with political violence every single day from right-wing white nationalists that we barely even notice. It is completely proper and it's completely expected and proper for us to condemn the violence that was done in the name of progressivism. It should be condemned. It has been condemned, and we will continue to condemn it. And it's completely proper for this to be on the news, all over the news. It's completely proper. But you know what else is realistic in this, the reality of our situation here in America? The amount of violence that comes from the right wing of the United States political spectrum is so ubiquitous that we barely bat an eye. We did a story 2 days ago of a neo-Nazi in Florida who had bomb-making materials and weapons in his home, caught dead to rights, red-handed, and the judge in the case released him on bail. This is because it's such a part of our society that we don't even get shocked. we don't even get surprised. It's the baseline. It's the default setting. This is where we start our day in America. We start our day in America fully aware that the most violence that occurs, the most political violence that occurs at the hands of right-wing domestic terrorists. And yet today and tomorrow, rightfully so, we will be outraged about this incident of this lone shooter, this incident of left-wing terrorism. But then we'll wake up on Monday next week and have another story of someone being killed in the name of right-wing conservative white nationalist terrorism. And we'll barely bat an eye because that's our default position here in America. A few more things that I'll say about this, and I want you to weigh in on the discussion, 857-600-0518. Incidents like this always tend to rally people around the victims. Rightfully so. We're not going to condemn that. We're not going to challenge that. That's what happens, and that's what should happen. However, we need to be fully mindful of what these people want to do to America. And if we're talking about unity, I'm sorry if my compassion level is so low that I do not believe that a single Democrat should be talking about unity with the Republicans because of today's events, because unity with the Republicans includes gutting health care for 24 million Americans. It's literally going to put 24 million more Americans off of health care. That is not something that, no matter how bad today's event was, that is not something that we can unify around. And we need to keep our wits about us, be respectful to what happened, be cognizant of what happened, wish them well, but we will not unify with you because of this event to hurt 24 million more Americans. You do not get a pass in that way. And if Democrats are so thrown off by today's events that they cannot keep the eye on the ball and realize that we need to protect 24 million more Americans, then we need to have a conversation about their ability to lead in tumultuous times. 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in. If you have any comments, you can leave them in the comments section. You can leave them in the comment section on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, and we'll bring them on the screen to discuss. Also, we are still in voicemail mode. Leave a voicemail, 857-600-0518. Had no idea we took that much time on that story. All right. Here's the news, other news happening across this tragic video. Terrible. It was very difficult to watch last night. 12 people are confirmed dead in the Grenfell Tower blaze in London. Firefighters rescued 65 people from a tower in North Kensington after they were called at 12:54 local time last night, or earlier this morning, yesterday. Lost some time. Witnesses said the people were trapped in the tower and the fire engulfed the building from the second floor to the top floor. And many people had to jump from windows in order to escape. According to the BBC, they stated that it is understood that several hundred people would have been in the block when the fire broke out, most of them sleeping. You can see footage of the fire on the screen. The tower has about 120 apartments, and the cause of the fire, as of now, is still unknown. 68 patients were taken to the hospital, 6 local hospitals, and 18 in critical condition, and there's still an untold number of people unaccounted for. Commander Stuart Cundy of the Metropolitan Police stated, sadly, I can confirm that there are now 12 people that have been confirmed dead that we know of. And he says, I do anticipate that number of fatalities will sadly increase to beyond those 12. And if you did see the video, there's several videos that show people who were trapped even as the building had been fully engulfed, flashing their lights, screaming, trying to get out any way they could. And sadly, there's still an untold number of people who are not accounted for. The Prime Minister said that they promised a proper investigation into the fire. Jeremy Corbyn, Labour leader, said that we need to know what reports were available and what information was given and what actions were taken Jeremy Corbyn is referring to several reports that came out prior to this that warned that this was possible, that this could happen, and that this was likely to happen at this apartment complex because of conditions inside of the building, because of faulty wiring inside of the building, and because of the inability for people to escape in the event of a fire. These are the type of the reports that came out prior to this happening. And now that this fire has occurred, it appears that everything that that people reported as being possible actually happened in the worst case scenario imaginable. News out of Afghanistan. General Mattis confirms that the White House has given him authority to set Afghanistan troop levels, according to CNN. The Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, confirmed today that President Trump has given him the authority to make all decisions regarding how many troops, U.S. troops, are deployed in Afghanistan. He told the Senate Appropriations Committee today, he stated, quote, "The delegation of this authority, consistent with the authority of President Trump granted me 2 months ago for Iraq and Syria, does not at this time change the troop numbers in Afghanistan." He went on to say that this assures that the department can facilitate our missions and nimbly align our commitment to the situation on the ground. He also stated that our overall mission in Afghanistan remains the same: to train, advise, and to assist the Afghan forces so they can safeguard the Afghan people, and terrorists can find no haven in Afghanistan for attacking us or others. Now, this is, in many regards, an abdication of duty by President Trump. We can call it a delegation of duty to General Mattis, but this is counter. This runs counter to everything that we know of a civilian-led military, a civilian-led armed forces. In times past, the President of the United States would seek the advice of his of his generals. He would seek the advice of the Pentagon. He would seek the advice of his Secretary of Defense. But he would make the ultimate decision on troop levels. And so by Donald Trump delegating this out, it really gives General Mattis the ability to do anything he wants within reason in Afghanistan. Previously, the White House had control over troop levels. Right now, there are currently 8,400 U.S. troops devoted to Operation Resolute support in Afghanistan. The Pentagon and the White House have been reviewing an option to send 3,000 to 5,000 additional forces solely in a, quote, training and advisory role. And this war has been declared having ended in 2014 by President Obama, but clearly we're still stuck in the quagmire that we've been in since post 2001, since September 11, 2001. But this is a dangerous precedent, right? This is a dangerous example of President Trump not wanting to take responsibility of his responsibility as the commander-in-chief. He is the commander-in-chief. It is his job. The buck stops with him. And he is delegating this responsibility to former General Mattis, Secretary of Defense James Mattis. And while we may have confidence in General Mattis's ability to do an efficient job, this really undermines the concept of a civilian-led armed forces. And it undermines it in the sense that now President Trump has released his responsibility and his authority and the ability to be, or in his mind, the ability for him to be held accountable for the decisions that are made in Afghanistan and the mistakes that are made in Afghanistan. The buck still stops with him. And I want to give, if someone were to give him advice, it would say, you're still going to be responsible for whatever happens in Afghanistan. Delegating this responsibility to Jim Mattis does not give you plausible deniability, nor does it insulate you from responsibility. And so since you have the responsibility, ultimately, shouldn't you be aware of what's happening there? I don't want to be responsible for something that I have zero input in. And Donald Trump has voluntarily relinquished his ability to have input into this. Now, surely he can pick it up anytime he's ready to pick it up. However, this seems grossly irresponsible. It almost seems as though he does not want the job. He does not want the responsibility of dictating to the armed forces as the commander-in-chief where we should be and what level of troops we should have in Afghanistan. All right, let's get you in on the conversation. Any comments, questions that you have, we want to hear them so we can discuss them. This is also some breaking news from the Washington Post. Now, before I go into the story about the Washington Post, I want to give a caveat at the beginning. This story that just broke regards to Donald Trump being under investigation for collusion. For obstruction of justice. Let me correct myself. Obstruction of justice. This is what just broke before our show started tonight. It is based on anonymous sources. I want to give that caveat at the beginning because it's important. It's important for us to realize the nature of this style of journalism. It has always existed. We have always had journalists who use anonymous sources to break stories. It is very possible that this story is 100% true, but I feel it's my responsibility to start at the beginning to say this is yet another story full of anonymous sources. That being said, these anonymous sources are officials affiliated with the ongoing investigation, and the special counsel has now, it's now believed that the special counsel is investigating Trump for possible obstruction of justice. So the special counsel overseeing, according to the Washington Post, overseeing the investigation into Russia's role in the 2016 election is interviewing senior intelligence officials as a part of a widening probe that now includes, quote, an examination of whether President Trump attempted to obstruct justice. And this is according to anonymous officials. This runs counter to, first of all, it's major breaking news. If confirmed, the president of the United States, who last week we learned from James Comey was not under investigation at the time that James Comey was the director of the FBI. According to these anonymous sources, President Trump is now officially under investigation for obstruction of justice by the special counsel. This again runs counter to the conversations that FBI Director James Comey had privately with Donald Trump, assuring him that he was not under investigation. It's worthwhile it's worthwhile having a conversation about it because the mere fact that we have a president who is potentially under investigation, and we will know in the next few days whether or not these anonymous sources were accurate in their reporting. I have some broader commentary in regards to this story. And I'm really holding my tongue on this because it's really I've gone this far. This is a crazy time in America. This is absolutely an absurd time in America with the shootings that happened today, with the ongoing investigations, the rampant denial on one side and the blind acceptance on the other side, the fervor with which people scurry to their side of the arguments and accept information, confirmation that so long as it provides a confirmation bias, they will accept it. And if it doesn't, they will reject it as fake news. We are in a very precarious time in the United States of America because one of the worst things that could happen, and whether it happens or not, is really out of our hands in America as Americans. But it would be quite destabilizing for Donald Trump to actually be impeached and put out of power. It would be destabilizing not because of America is able to, the structure, the system, the institutions, they're very capable of trucking along with Mike Pence. But it's very disturbing and very destabilizing because of the fever pitch with which we are in America. The level of angst that we have. Here's the problem with it. I am not going to be one to say that one side has to take down over the other, because that creates an asymmetrical fight that gives power to the person or to the side of the equation that can feign the greatest outrage or threaten the greatest amount of backlash. But that in and of itself undermines our ability to not have destabilizing events in America. What I mean by that is the fact that no side is going to take down. The fact that both sides reject anything that breaks, that they don't believe. Anything that breaks their confirmation bias, anything that goes counter to what they believe in their narrative, neither side is going to take down. And we're running headlong into a deeply seated divide that I'm not sure anybody is going to be able to lead us beyond. And that's because we are in this place. That's because we're here now. We're here now where the president of the United States is possibly under investigation if these sources are confirmed or if these sources are accurate. And if the president of the United States is under investigation for obstruction of justice, that means the president of the United States could very well be impeached for obstruction of justice. And that will set some things in motion because you have one side of the equation who now today feels they feel justified in their outrage against the liberal media. Today, they feel justified against the outrage against progressivism. Today, they feel like they have the right to stand up and protect and defend the Constitution of the United States because liberalism is trying to destroy America. And at the same time, progressives, we can't capitulate to that type of strong-armed terrorism. Okay, I'm going to take that word back. That type of strong-armed antics. That type of, we are so outraged, so you must absolutely take down and let us have our way, and we unify around policies that are going to destroy America. So ultimately, the question is, what do we do as Americans? And can we continue on this track of perpetual outrage, confirmation bias in a system, in an environment, in a time where there seems to be no end to either one of those? This is one of the conversations that I don't have an answer for. I don't have a solution for. I simply do realize that this is where we are, and this is something that we should be cognizant of. News coming out of Flint, Michigan today. Michigan health chief has been charged with involuntary manslaughter in the Flint water crisis. According to NPR, multiple Michigan state officials will be charged related to the Flint water crisis. The director of Michigan's Department of Health and Human Services, Nick Lyon, has been charged with involuntary manslaughter and misconduct in the office over the Flint water crisis. Both of these are felonies. So it's very possible that in light of all the people who have gotten sick, in light of the people who have died, it's very possible that the director of the Department of Health and Human Services could spend time in jail. Dr. Eden Wells, the state chief medical executive, she will be charged with obstruction of justice. 4 other officials, including the former Flint emergency manager and former director of public works, were also charged with involuntary manslaughter. Now, these charges seem to come from an investigation by the Michigan's Attorney General. The Attorney General, General Bill Schwett, said at a press conference on today, he said, Mr. Lyon failed in his, quote, Mr. Lyon failed in his responsibilities to protect the health and safety of citizens of Flint. Schwett, he also launched a probe back in 2016, and his investigation is looking into, quote, what, if any, Michigan laws were violated in the process that resulted in the contamination crisis currently forcing Flint residents to rely on bottled water for drinking, cooking, and bathing, as well as fear for their health. It would be amazing if elected officials and officials in general could be held accountable for the things that they do that have been directly detrimental to their citizens. It would be fascinating to actually see someone be held accountable for their missteps that led to the misery of thousands of people. That not only misery, but the long-term damaging effects that these people in Flint, Michigan have to live with for a long time to come. It would be fascinating and surprising. Ultimately, it would be surprising because when have we seen elected officials actually be held criminally accountable for their actions that directly and adversely affected the people for whom they represent? The manslaughter charges stem from an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease. It's a type of pneumonia, and it's spread throughout the city following the switch of Flint's water supply. The disease killed 12 people and sickened more than 70 between 2014 and 2015. And so now there's only a question of what level of culpability do these individuals hold? And when we say what level, what will they be found guilty of? One final story here. Actually, I don't want to do that story. It's a spinoff of the story. The Democrats are suing Donald Trump again for his business ties and the potential of him making money from foreign heads of government. I want to just circle back to what we talked about earlier, the shootings today, and the reality of political violence in America. And how divided America really is. And the divide in America right now is really the culmination. It's the logical conclusion of two things. The fact that we are a democracy and we allow opposition, and the liberalization of media, and where we have in terms of our mainstream media, we have everything being reduced down to basically 5 major outlets or 5 major corporations that control our mainstream media. We do have a liberalization effect, a democratization effect online with regards to media. And this has created an environment where everyone can live in their hermetically sealed bubbles. They can live in their echo chambers, and no one can really break through those echo chambers. And there's no driving force for anyone in this equation, especially not the editors at these outlets. There's no driving force to compel them to be responsible when there is a direct connection to your profit margin and how irresponsible you can be. The more salacious the headline, the more clicks. The more outrageous the story, the more clicks. And so your bottom line is directly tied to how outrageous you can be. And so long as that's the fact of life, which I don't see that changing, nor do I know if I actually want that to change. But as long as that is the fact of life, we will always have these siphons, these siphoned off communities that can hear exactly what they want to hear, that tells us that everybody in the other siphon, everybody in the other silo is a monster and that they're not human. And I want to be clear, what I'm not saying and what I'm not doing here is drawing a false equivalence between the type of madness that we see in one party versus the other party, right? In many ways, this model has been perfected by Fox News, the mother of this last generation of this madness, Fox News. They have now dropped their subtitle of Fair and Balanced. And thankfully, they have gone ahead and gotten rid of that because everybody realized all along they were never fair and balanced. But that model was so profitable that it saturated and it trickled down to every single outlet, big or small, online, on television, in print. It became the model through which millions upon millions, billions of dollars have been made. And because of that model, it is now possible for an individual to live in a world where they never have to hear a competing idea. And that's where we are. And there is no solution for it. I'm afraid that there is no solution for it because any solution would entail the curtailing of the freedom of speech. Any solution that says, if in response to this attack today, if someone said, we're going to crack down on hate speech, we're going to crack down on, how are we defining hate speech? Are we defining it now based on the political affiliation of the victims today? In other words, hate speech now is anyone who speaks out against the Trump administration. If that's the case, then we're in more trouble than I can even imagine right now. But we have all the elements. We have all the elements in place. And the only thing that really stops, I was reading, I'm not sure the outlet. I think it may have been Newsweek. Don't ask me why I was reading Newsweek. I was there. But as I was reading on Newsweek, they started off the conversation with America's Cold Civil War, playing off the Cold War that never really went hot. But we're in a cold civil war. And we have factions, we have sub-factions, and we have a great abyss that divides us. And I read that, and it really just kind of, thought about this all day long. And the reality of it is that there's really only one saving grace in America. And it's really the fact that America is big enough, our military forces are strong enough to crush any rebellion that ever thought about getting off the ground. And I say that almost tongue in cheek. I say that tongue in cheek, but realistically, this idea that is latent in extremist circles in the United States of America, that there could be a violent revolution, is one of the most irresponsible, and not only irresponsible, insidious, but also just imbecilic ideas imaginable. There is no winning of a violent revolution on either side of the equation, particularly on the left side of the equation, because if I could be so coy, this dude shot about 50 or 75 rounds, and the only person that was killed was him. Leftists, we're talking about right-wing militias that have been training, that have been in the woods, that know their way. They got little girls that run around on video now where they're trained, and they go through the jungle and just accuracy, just shot. This idea of a leftist violent revolution, if anybody is playing around with that idea, please, for the sake of everyone involved, stop. Just stop. Because it's ridiculous. It is not a fight. Noam Chomsky said it's not a fight that we can win, because that's not who we are. That's not what we stand for. That's not what we represent. Therefore, that's not what we train for. And today is the quintessential example of it. 2 minutes of shooting, shot after shot after shot after shot. And it looks like the only person who died in this incident, we're still waiting to hear on Scalise and everyone who's in critical condition. We wish them well, even if Scalise is who he is, and we'll talk about who he is when he fully recovers. We'll leave that until he recovers. But the only person that was killed was the guy with the high-power rifle. Meanwhile, some of my friends, conservative friends in the South, they've been shooting guns since they were 2. They've been gutting, their kill since they were 6. They've been living in the woods, training just to be good hunters since they were 7. Not only that, but even those right-wing militias, the reality of it is that there is not going to be a violent revolution in the United States of America that America itself will not protect itself from. And anyone who's fueling that idea, even quietly, even just kind of tongue in cheek, they're so delusional, and they're being so irresponsible, because at the end of the day, the only change, like Bernie Sanders said, the only real change that we can affect in the United States of America is through the system that now has sufficient enough power that it doesn't matter what your ideology is, left or right, it has sufficient enough power to crush any violent revolution that would rear its head. That being said, have a good night.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.